people can argue against what I'm going to say, and that's their right. But for me, the biggest loser is America, for the simple reason. Iran, in its constitution, Article 154, is to support the oppressed people around the world.
If you consider yourself strong, the worst thing you can do is get yourself into unnecessary confrontations. Because if you get beat by an opponent, then everyone sees you for who you are. A bully who carries the illusion of being unstoppable. Now in this video, Elijah Manier explains why the illusion of US unstoppability is nothing more than a facade, and I just exposed the United States so far to be nothing more than a paper tiger.
And I'm going to explain how people need to think about this kind of information when they receive them, regardless who is behind them. For the Iranians, deliver the enrichment uranium that they have in Fordo and Natanz and Isfahan, it is out of the question. They will never give it to the Americans. This is one of the main demands of Donald Trump. However, the Iranians proposed to the Americans to move away from the nuclear deal because that will take years to negotiate on very small details and the technicality. Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner are not informed, and they have no competence in the technicality related to the nuclear program. It takes really expert people in the US and Iran to sit together and to agree on every single detail about the enrichment, uranium, the percentage, where and why, and then the centrifuge, the potentiality of the centrifuge, which generation. They need to discuss all that and how they will run the inspection of the IAEA. The nuclear dossier is not as simple as that. This is why the Iranians said, we'll leave it on the side, we will talk about it later. However, we will not speak about anything with you unless the war stops, but not under a ceasefire agreement. Because the ceasefire, there is a legality and a legal language behind it that is very complicated for a normal audience who did not follow the war and these kind of treaties, obviously. So if you're talking about a lasting ceasefire, or you're talking about a temporary ceasefire, or you're talking about an immediate ceasefire, or you're talking about a permanent ceasefire, all these can be contested and war can regain anytime from one side to another. Therefore, Iran is asking the end of the war, and they want the end of the war on all fronts in the Middle East, including Lebanon. Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to include Lebanon because he wants to continue flattening the villages in the south of Lebanon. He did that with 20, and he wants to continue to 55, and he doesn't want Donald Trump to stop him. This is the first main obstacles in front of any deal of end of the war between Iran and the United States, because the United States depend on Israel approval in this point. Secondly, they need to talk about the nuclear dossier, or they need to talk about the sanctions. If the Iranians are saying we talk about nuclear dossier last, the sanction, is Donald Trump going to accept to sell to the neocon in the United States that he has released the billions of dollars that are Iranian billions frozen in different banks in different countries around the world, including Iraq, where they did not pay fully for the gas, in Qatar, in Korea, in other parts of the world. So is he going to say, I gave back the Iranian money? Again, the neocon and the Israeli will stand against him, and they will tell him, no, you don't give back this money because Iran will finance terrorism in the Middle East, and then they attack him. And he himself criticized Barack Obama because he released some of the Iranian frozen money in 2015. So there are serious complications in this deal between the Americans and the Iranians. Therefore, when you guys hear that there is a deal and there are 14 points, every single point is a trap. Therefore, there is a there should be an agreement where both sides agree to end the war in the first place. But then if the Americans say we accept to end the war, it means that Iran can declare victory because Iran did not start the war and America did not achieve anything. So again, Donald Trump will be attacked and we say, well, you have failed to achieve anything against Iran and now you want to end the war under which basis? So this is where the complication lies. Well, Donald Trump it has trapped himself when he said he has completely obliterated the nuclear dossier and the nuclear program. There is nothing left, including all the enrichment uranium. And then he's telling the world that Iran is making a nuclear bomb and he is stopping it. And then now he's talking about actually he wants the enrichment of 60% to be shipped to the United States. So he is delivering so many versions in one sentence that people find it very difficult to understand what does he want at the end of the day. But we know that he is acknowledging that Iran still have the nuclear dossier intact in some aspect, which means it has been damaged, but the knowledge is still there, and creating, manufacturing centrifuge is so easy. And the 60%, in the first place, Iran increased its production from 3.75 to 20% when the Iranian head of the nuclear program, Fakhrizadeh, in 2020 was assassinated. And then Iran went to in 2021 to 60% enrichment uranium only when the Mossad and the CIA attacked the Natanz facility and introduced a virus to create a catastrophe in it. So these 20% and 60% for Iran are not useful for any of its program, in particular because it is not willing to produce a nuclear bomb. However, having said that, as Iran is part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, Iran has the legal right to produce even 90% uranium, enrichment uranium, with the control of the IAEA organization, but without doing and going toward a military nuclear program. So Donald Trump wants to deprive Iran from making any level of enrichment uranium, and this is why Iran is standing against it. Now, Donald Trump acknowledged that the knowledge of the Iranians cannot be destroyed. It's impossible. This is what Rafael Grossi, the director of the IAEA, has been saying for years to everybody in Israel, in the West, in Europe, and to the United States, that you cannot destroy the knowledge the Iranians have acquired throughout the decade. Therefore, there is a need to sit around the table and negotiate, not trust, because both sides don't trust one another, but to negotiate and make and impose a mechanism where everybody is happy. Is the enrichment uranium still intact or not? Where the centrifuge are there, the knowledge is there. If they are intact or not, it makes no difference because Iran can go to any percentage anytime. And the only possibility to reverse this procedure is for the United States and Israel to say, okay, we pay all the damage that we have caused on you in this unlawful war, and then negotiate with Iran not to impose fees on the Strait of Hormuz. That could work. However, I don't see Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu accepting to pay a penny back to Iran. Israel is mainly focused today on Lebanon. It is destroying the villages in the south of Lebanon and making sure that the society that supports Hezbollah is paying the price. Even in the south of Lebanon, there are Christian villages who are against Hezbollah, and these villages also have been attacked by the Israelis, where we have seen the convents destroyed. We have seen many local Christians suffering and expressing how they were attacked by the Israelis when they were not involved in this war. However, for the Israelis, it's very clear. They want to make sure they are flattening the south of Lebanon, and they want to do that in 55 villages that they do not occupy at the moment. And this is why Hezbollah is conducting a war of attrition. For the Israelis today to stop the war, it is like a suicide for Benjamin Netanyahu, because he has failed to defeat Hamas. Hamas is still in Gaza. He has failed to defeat Hezbollah, is still there. He has failed to change the ruling system in Iran, and Iran is still imposing its conditions on the United States. Therefore, for him to see the card of Lebanon slipping away, or Donald Trump forcing him to stop the war there, it will be the end of his political career. And this is why Benjamin Netanyahu is really speeding up the destruction of civilian homes in the south of Lebanon, even those unrelated to the society that support Hezbollah. He is exerting what is called a collective punishment and war crime and crime against humanity against the people in the south of Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley. Because, for example, today he gave evacuation orders to 12 villages in the Bekaa Valley included. He's not limiting himself south of the Litani River. He's going also north of the Litani River and even around Sidon. So the enlargement of the war is something that Donald Trump is supporting, because without his support, Benjamin Netanyahu would not do it. The resistance, on the other hand, is making sure that it is conducting a war of attrition against Benjamin Netanyahu, because the point of the resistance today is different than in 2024. Today, Hezbollah is not defending the geography. On the contrary, it is allowing the Israelis to come in, enlarge their presence in different villages, and then pick up which target they want to hit first. This what offers to Hezbollah numerous targets, and that makes the cost on the Israelis much higher than what they have expected. Lebanon has a different topography than Gaza. It's not a plain territory, and the topography in Lebanon is completely different. There are valleys, there are mountains, there are hills. So there are the variation of ambush for the Israelis that are waiting for them. And this is why Hezbollah count on Israel to be static in a position and is attacking this position. Is that going to give Benjamin Netanyahu any strategic objectives? Of course not. But this is not a war that can finish in 1 week or in 1 month or even in 1 year if there is no ceasefire. What Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump are counting is to arm the Lebanese army that received the orders from the president to withdraw the first day the Israeli occupation forces advance into Lebanese territory. And today, the Americans want to arm this army to fight domestically a civil war against more than a third of the Lebanese population. This is what some of the political leaders in the country are trying to avoid, because again, that serves the American and the Israelis' objective to turn the attention of the resistance away from the borders and to focus more domestically in what's happening inside the country.
So what's the goal here? Is it just endless war? And is Israel just have that much leverage right now, given its a unique position in relationship to the United States to keep this going?
The Americans and the Israelis always trying to achieve in peacetime what they have failed to achieve in wartime. But on the other hand, the opposition groups, state or non-state actors, are very much aware of the Israeli and the American plan. It doesn't mean the Israelis and the Americans do not succeed in some area, like, for example, in Iraq, they imposed the prime minister the prime minister of Iraq, selected by the majority of the parliament, failed because the Americans said, we do not accept him. So in this case, they have succeeded. In the case of Lebanon, they have not succeeded because they did not really show any intention to have a peace deal with Lebanon. They refused to withdraw from any occupied Lebanese territory, and that gave the possibility for the local resistance, because Lebanon, as the US presidential envoy Thomas Barak said, is a failed state. It's a state that cannot defend the country, cannot offer protection to the population. The prime minister, during his visit, the Lebanese prime minister, during his visit to the south of Lebanon, said, do not ask me protection because I can't offer it. This is why they rely on the resistance. So Hezbollah withdrew from the south of the Litani River during the 15 months of ceasefire, kind of a ceasefire, when the Israelis did not respect it and violated it between 10 to 15,000 times, killing more than 500 Lebanese. Now the resistance is back to south of the Litani River and will not leave it. That is a different position than before this last war of February 2026 that the Lebanese government needs to deal with, and thought that that was behind them. So the whole work of Israel and America now is to try and achieve something without using military means, because if the Americans and the Israelis fail to disarm Hezbollah, they want to give the task to the Lebanese army to do it. It's impossible for the Lebanese army to do it because it's made of different sects, different religious sects, Sunni, Shia, Christian, and Druze. And in the first instant that the order is to attack Hezbollah, then the branch of the Shia inside the Lebanese army, most of them will leave, and that will create a division and will create a catastrophe in Lebanon, which is a perfect scenario for the Israelis. So these are the plans, more or less, at the moment. The plan also to try and, from the other side, from the Iranian side, for example, to reinforce the relationship with Yemen, because Bab el-Mandeb is very important. We have seen how Bab el-Mandeb was a very strong card during the war on Gaza and was not used during this war, but could have been used had the Europeans joined the war in the Strait of Hormuz. And then all the Iranian allies would have used all their tools and their powerful card to stand against the Israelis and the Americans. And we understand today that Iran will reinforce the relationship with Hezbollah in the future, because even with a ceasefire, as long as Israel is commanded by the far right, who believe and voiced the Great of Israel plan, which is part of Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and part of Egypt, which means that there's not going to be peace in the Middle East, and any end of the war today or in the next weeks or month that is going to be signed is not going to be respected on the long term, and everybody will be prepared for another war. Iran, in its constitution, Article 154, is to support the oppressed people around the world. Iran supported Venezuela, where there are Christian, the Kurds in Iraq, in Kurdistan, and they are Sunni and atheist. So they supported the Sunni in Palestine, the Islamic Jihad, and Hamas. So for Iran to support these groups, if they want to continue their struggle against the occupation forces, then Iran will not stop, but it cannot dictate on these countries or these non-state actors or state actors what to do and what not to do. Iran cannot tell the Gulf country to stop their relationship with the United States, because the Gulf country will say, hey, well, that's my business, and I decide with whom I have a relationship. So why the Americans and the Israelis want to dictate on Iran with whom Iran can have relationship with. I think the world will not be the same after this war for a simple reason. Today, people can argue against what I'm going to say, and that's their right. But for me, the biggest loser is America for the simple reason. The Americans are known to be the strongest, the superpower, and the most powerful country in the world. It went to attack with the strongest military power in the Middle East, a country that is Iran, under 47 years of sanctions, and failed to impose or to achieve any of its objectives after 40 days of extremely heavy bombardment from all their positions in 8 countries in the Middle East. They've used all their power. They've used also the internal insurgency against the Iranians. They used the opposition. They supplied them with arms. They supplied them with Starlink, satellite communication, everything. They infiltrate the country to change the ruling system, and they have failed. China is watching. Today, the Arabs are discussing and putting in question the presence of the Americans who failed to defend themselves and to defend their bases and to defend the Arab countries that hosting these bases. That is also very visible. China is also watching the way the Americans are fighting, and they're watching the way the Iranians are retaliating. What hurt the Iranian the most and what hurt the American the most? What kind of weapons are more effective against the Americans or against the Iranians? All these lessons are drawn by the military in every single nation, but today China can sleep much better because China can look at the Americans and actually say, well, these are not the superpower that they were trying to scare me throughout the decade and threatening me through Taiwan, through Philippines, in the China Sea, everywhere around me to try and create a circle to surround me and try to intimidate me. Today, China feels much stronger because China understands that its relationship in the global south actually is much better and much more productive than with the West, even if that will not stop China from dealing with Europe. But today, Europe is completely on the side. The Americans are on their own. They were abandoned by the Europeans. They were abandoned by their allies, even NATO. This is why the Americans have lost all of that. And this is not insignificant. On the contrary, today we see what Iran has done with the United States. It has dared to attack every single US bases in the Middle East. No one since 1945 has attacked the American bases and at this level and destroy these bases and get away with it, even if it was bombed. China is much more powerful than Iran. So the comparison between what the Americans can do to China and to Iran today is very visible by the Chinese. And this is why we heard China saying very clearly to all the 4 refineries, you do not abide by the US sanctions and you continue receiving the oil from Iran. That was the first very visible, overt challenge to the United States. And I can tell you, after the war, when Iran will regain its health, and particularly the military strength, China will be the first to support Iran. For the last 3-4 years, I've been pushing back when I am asked, it is the end of the US empire. And I am not a fan of conspiracy theories. But for the first time, I say this is the beginning of the end of the US empire for a very particular reason. And this reason comes from the Gulf countries. The United States is strong today only because the oil is sold in dollar. What happened in the last 60 days, and in particular the 40 days of war, imposed a reality on all the Gulf countries who are the oil-rich countries, they are the ones who are going to bring down the United States through the selling of the oil. Today, these countries will go toward Iran at the end of the war and will have a security treaty and agreement among them to make sure that they will not be attacked in any next war. In exchange, they will not rely on the United States to use their bases or to host bases of the Americans on their territory, apart from Bahrain. Keep Bahrain on the side. The Emirates will be stubborn for a while, but then we'll have to acknowledge, and I will explain even more why. The Strait of Hormuz is indispensable. Those who believed today that Iran used and abused its card of the Strait of Hormuz and the Arab country will go toward the Red Sea following the Saudi Arabia Yambo plan to export oil from the Red Sea are mistaken, because first, the Arab countries need between 5 to 10 years to be able to join their operation toward the Red Sea and give up on the Strait of Hormuz. Second, to do this kind of project, they need $100 billion. People might argue they have enough money. I agree. But the third point is the most important one. How they are going to protect all their pump on the way crossing the desert. One single drone at each pump will cripple the entire production and will blow up all the $100 billion investment. And to confirm what I'm saying, one attack from Iran against Qatar, an installation that cost $26 billion, according to the Qatari, created the damage, one single attack, of $20 billion. So today, Iran is in control of the Strait of Hormuz. And because of that, the Arabs understand that they cannot be at war with Iran in the future, either on the Red Sea or in the Strait of Hormuz. And that will push America on the side, and it will be the beginning of the Arab looking toward diversifying their security with Pakistan, Turkey, and also Iran, but again, making sure that they don't want to be in a position where they are in the middle in any future war.